If you are planning on selling your home, you might want to interview a few agents. Asking the right questions is key. Some of the questions I have received during an interview have been good, others not so good. Like the time the seller asked me if I'd be willing to Hi, I'm Francine Viola, Realtor in Olympia, Washington, and I recently was interviewed by a potential seller, and they asked me some great questions. But this also reminded me of all the really bad questions I've been asked over the years. Here are my tips for getting the answers you really need when interviewing agents. And stick around to the end, and I'll share some of the crazy questions I've been asked. Most sellers like yourself are probably interviewing agents to find someone who is competent. Do they even know what they're doing? And is this a person you can work with and trust? Do they have the expertise, experience, and education to help you get the most from your sale? But too many sellers stick with close-ended questions like, how many transactions have you done? Or what company do you work for? And these types of questions aren't going to help you decide on an agent. They might be important questions, but they shouldn't be the only questions you're asking. Let me tell you about my brother's experience. Now, by the way, he lives in another state, so it's not like he was interviewing me. He was living in another state at the time, and he interviewed an agent, and he called me after that interview. He was disappointed because he liked this guy, but when he asked him how many listings he had, the agent said he had 5. And my brother wasn't too happy with that answer. I said, well, what's wrong with 5 listings? What were you expecting? And my brother said he thought most agents had like 100 listings. My brother has 2 PhDs, but he's an idiot when it comes to real estate. 100 listings are a lot of listings for one agent. In my brother's town, they had about 400 homes listed for sale. I asked him, how many agents do you think are in this area? And he thought, well, maybe 100. Well, that's probably way too low, but we'll go with that. Using these numbers, on average, an agent would have 4 listings. With some context, my brother understood and tempered his expectations. However, my point is, asking this question of how many listings or how many transactions a realtor has done really doesn't mean anything to the seller, because do you know the context of that information? And you may say, well, Francine, I'm interviewing 3 agents and I'm going to compare all 3 answers. Okay, so one agent tells you they have 50 listings, the second agent tells you they have 0 listings, and the third agent tells you they have 5. Which one is the better agent? In a hot seller's market, what is a good number? A good number might be 0. That agent sold all of their listings. Or maybe 50 is a better number. In a market with so few listings, here you have this agent who has a lot of them. And is that agent telling you just their production or the production of their team or firm? Without context, this isn't very helpful to you in determining which agent will be the best one for you. Close-ended questions like this, in my opinion, they aren't going to help you. Instead, my suggestion is to ask open-ended questions. This is where you can really get the good information. I was recently interviewed and the seller asked the perfect question. How do you handle multiple offer situations? That is such a great question because the seller was able to learn about my approach and my expertise, and my answer also gave them insight into my personality and if my work process was similar to theirs. Asking how and what questions are a great start. How would you do this? What would you do in this situation? These types of questions will give you the answers you are really seeking, and then you can determine if this agent has the competency, personality, and is someone you can trust with your home sale. Now, as promised, here are my top 5 crazy questions I have been asked by a potential seller. Coming in at number 5. What kind of car do you drive? I don't see a right answer here. If I drove up in a Bentley, then I make too much money. If I drove up in a 20-year-old beater car with the bumper falling off, I don't think I'd get the listing either. Number 4, what does your husband do? Well, so much for feminism. I'm not sure where the sellers were going with this. Maybe they thought I was doing real estate as a hobby. I don't know. Number 3, how aggressive are you? It was hard for me to answer this question with a straight face because I kept thinking, Number 2. This is a bad one. Could you scoop up the dog duties before showings? I'm going to tell you right now, that's a hard no. And the number 1 crazy question I've been asked by a seller during an interview is actually a tie between what kind of cookies will you be baking for my open house? And any question that starts with, Zillow has my home estimated for. I'm a former appraiser. Don't ask me any question with a reference to Zillow and their Zestimates. Then you're going to see how aggressive I am. If you are planning on selling your home, contact me today. In the meantime, you might like these other videos about selling your house here in Olympia. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.